Okay. Yay. We are back for another chapter. I know. I had a concussion, then I didn't post, then I did post, and then I didn't post. But I'm going to give you 2 videos this week so you don't have to wait long for the next chapter. Without further ado, let's read chapter 6, No One to Call. And I might not remember how to do the voices, so wish me luck. Deborah dug her spoon into an untouched carton of vanilla bean ice cream. Her new gray sectional stretched across most of the room, wrapping around the walls in a U shape. Instead of having a vacant center, like many elongated couches, it was filled like a cream donut. With the carton situated on a blanket covering her lap, she could avoid dishes by skipping the use of a bowl and transferring the sweet treat straight into her mouth. Like the ice cream in its gallon of goodness, her body softened into the new couch cushions. A few seconds passed while Deborah's eyes delved aimlessly into her laptop screen, spoon going in and out of her mouth. Work couldn't last long like that, she decided to call it. Switching from work cases to watching Friends, Deborah used her phone to turn the flat screen on, giving the white wall color and life. Typically, when Deborah was home, so were Chandler, Monica, Joey, Phoebe, Ross, and Rachel. She told herself that multitasking made her work easier, and it did, since it made her less lonely. 10 seasons provided her at least half a year of company, depending on how large of a workload she had. More work, more friends. Once again, she had recently started watching season 1. Disappointed, Deborah realized she was on episode 11, the one with Mrs. Bing. The episode introduced Chandler's mother, an uninvolved and unaware woman. The lady flaunted a sexualized lifestyle in complete ignorance of her child. Deborah highly disapproved of her, but she let the episode play because she related to the funny, yet sad side story of Phoebe and Monica, chasing after a dream man who didn't exist. During the episode, Deborah tried to feel sympathy for Mrs. Bing, as mothering wasn't easy. Plenty of women failed at their duties. Sometimes Deborah felt like she had failed, but she tried to avoid these vulnerable thoughts. Her kids were fine, she reassured herself. They were alive. At least, she assumed they were. Both of her daughters were too distant, living in Utah. Her son lived in New York City too, but she checked the clock. He was late. Out of all of her children, Brandon talked to her the most. At least, he had talked to her the most since his quarter-life crisis at age 26. Even though he refused to save money by moving in with Deborah, he visited her each time she prompted him to, and some weeks he showed up before requested. Since his routine visits began in June, Deborah lavished him with attention, her attempts at understanding, which required sacrificing her tongue to her teeth, and adoration. Her motherly, purposefully ignorant devotion lasted a month before she advised him to get a job. No college graduate should have to work night shifts at a warehouse, especially not for manual labor. Out of all the kids, Deborah thought she had succeeded the most with Brandon. As she formed a text, asking where he was, a creaking came from the door. Her son walked in. Perking up, Deborah said, "I was just about to." What had happened? His head. It was ruined. His strawberry blonde hair, shaved down to bristles, to near non-existence. "What have you done?" "I quit," he said. Behind him, he dragged a suitcase into the apartment. "And I sold my apartment contract. Had to pay for the other guy's first 2 months, but stop. Deborah threw her hands up and then massaged her temples. One hand dropped and covered her face as she said, "Let me think." Shaking her head, she grabbed a hair tie and put her frail blonde hair into a ponytail. Carrying a white kitchen stool, Brandon found a spot near the couch and placed it there. The modern bar stool, shaped like a 7, had not considered comfort in its design. When Brandon sat down, his nose scrunched up as if he had smelled something off. "Okay," Deborah said, finally looking up at her son. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Brandon said. An angry huff left Deborah. "I can't help if you don't tell me what's going on. It's clear something is going on." A soft thumping sounded as Brandon tapped his foot against the stool. "Mom, you know I've been trying to figure out what to do, and you've been great. You funded my Habitat for Humanity's trip, and it was great. But since coming back, I felt even more off. But now I figured out what to do with my life, and..." He pointed at his head. "It's not becoming a rock star." The haircut meant something. People who had short, precise haircuts did so for an organization, a clan, an army. Deborah held her breath. She knew why her son had cut his hair. She knew what he was going to do. She just didn't think he would follow through with it. "I'm going to become a monk." Not that explanation. Deborah couldn't find the words. "A Buddhist monk," Brandon said. In that moment, the world Deborah had built for her son collapsed, and Deborah's thoughts spiraled. How could he possibly perceive this as his best option? Monks are social isolationists. Brandon will never get to where he needs to be in his life if he does this. You're really following through with this? You really want to leave your job at the bank? A shadow fell onto Brandon's face. I was an accounting graduate with a teller job. They won't miss me. They can just hire some kid who graduated from high school. They can move you up. You're in the system. And if they notice, Mom, I already quit. I've been talking about this for over a month. I told you I was going to do this. Why are you surprised? With all the guilting and grumbling that had happened in the past month, she predicted her son would change his mind. He often floated from place to place, but he stayed near his mom. After all, that's why he ended up in New York. While studying accounting in Nebraska, he spent most of his time off visiting his dad, simply because he was closer. Brandon had moved to New York afterwards so he could make up for the time not spent with his mom, and perhaps find his place on Wall Street. Despite Deborah's persistence over the past month, despite the fury that had swirled within her, the blazes she lit under Brandon hadn't turned his ambition to ashes. It only made him burn brighter. While a gentle pull would have helped, Deborah couldn't stop herself from pushing, and while she could control how hard she pushed, only Brandon could control what direction her pushes took him. Turning her head to the ceiling, Deborah said, I guess I forgot to put your flight in my calendar. Brandon stepped off the stool and stood up. One of my friends said he would drive me to the airport in the morning, so you don't have to worry about that. I just wanted to say goodbye before I left. Pushing down the building fumes of anger and the crashing waves of sorrow, Deborah left the couch and faced her son. Are you sure about this? You can always move in with me. We can find you another job. We can find you something you'll like. You can come work with me. No thanks, Mom. This is what I want to do. I wish you would have chosen differently. Deborah hugged her son, thinking about how far away he would live, how she wouldn't see him, how she'd have to rely on the postal service to communicate with him. I love you, she said into his shoulder. I love you too. Once again, Deborah had been left to live alone in her nest of broken branches. Friends stayed on regardless, no matter the circumstance. Deborah took another large spoonful of now melting vanilla and sent it through the open invitation of her lips. Her taste buds enjoyed the experience, but her heart dove deep into the depths of the gallon box. She stood up and crossed over into the open kitchen, tossing the spoon into her kitchen sink and the ice cream into the freezer. Despite the tasks left that she could assign herself, Deborah decided to stop working. Outrageous scenes played and audience laughs sounded into her dark living room, but Deborah didn't join them. With little reluctance, instead of returning to the couch, she departed farther from the television. Each step led her to and up short, straight stairs. One wooden plank after another seemed to levitate, attached by the side to black bars. Deborah preferred to stay in touch with popular aesthetics and had chosen the apartment because it reflected every modern taste, most of which would expire within the next decade. At the top of her stairs, she turned left and entered her children's bedroom. Before she had moved to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, Deborah's family had lived in Papillion, a suburban town in Nebraska, the place that few people knew anything about, and when they knew something, it was usually one of two things: that it's a long, painfully flat state to drive through, that it has a lot of corn. Papillion was the French word for butterfly, but to Deborah, the town had the appearance of a caterpillar. Their family lived there because her ex-husband had worked for the railway company located nearby. White collar, of course. Her apathetic attitude toward Papillion resulted in a move or house renovation every 5 years, give or take, but because the children complained if she suggested them switching schools, they had to stay in the same city. The family-centered Christian community had its perks, and she would have enjoyed it more if it weren't for the boring nature of the town. Oh, it's summer? Eat corn and steak. Oh, it's fall? Blink and you'll miss it. Oh, it's winter. Don't go outside, you'll get frostbite. Oh, it's spring? You can see the grass now. It's dead. True, there were more activities than what Deborah thought available. Even so, had she joined in all the Midwest festivities, she would have preferred life in the city. To her, the only thing her city life lacked was enough bedrooms for her kids. The apartment she owned in the Upper West Side cost more than any of the houses they had owned in Papillion. Her ex-husband hadn't cared much for extravagances. If it proved for their basic needs, he was satisfied. With slight remorse, post-divorce Deborah had most of the merchandise she wanted but never got in their marriage, excluding the 2 extra bedrooms for her kids. Each time a child stayed with her, she lugged their items out of the storage unit and recreated their childhood rooms for them. Books, awards, and photos all went up onto the walls. Bed sheets were switched out, and little decorative pieces were traded as well. She reasoned that Brandon would have the most basic decorations, as he had stayed away from extracurriculars, or as he called them, extra ridiculars. Her middle child and now 25-year-old Savannah would get beach-themed decor since she dreamed of living in California. With her move to the palm tree-filled southern end of Utah, St. George, she had come closer to achieving this. Shelly would get nature-based items since she liked art. When no one stayed with her, Deborah kept it as a guest room and hung up a high school headshot of each kid along with their high school diplomas. All of this rearranging took a great deal of work, but Deborah didn't mind the labor, and she didn't have to do it often. Brandon might stay in Thailand for years, and Savannah seemed long gone. It comforted Deborah to know that her two daughters lived in the same state, but she also knew they didn't interact. St. George was around 4 hours south of Provo. Shelly opposed traveling, and while Savannah adored it, she chose to travel to other places than home and family. As Deborah lay down onto the gray-covered twin bed, she snapped out her phone and instinctively called Savannah. Perhaps, she thought, her eldest daughter would answer this time. On the fourth ring, a cheery, spoiled voice said, "Hello." "Hi, Savannah. I missed you, sweetie. How are you?" "Nope," she said in a flat voice. Before she hung up, Deborah heard the disappearing voice murmur, "Ugh, didn't realize it was her." Deborah lay still on the bed with the phone pressed to her face. She breathed in and out. Didn't think, didn't feel. After a few seconds of senselessness, her first natural thought and feeling overwhelmed her. Her daughter didn't want her. Her daughter didn't love her. Tears flitted toward her cheeks, her chin, the covers. She drew in all the surrounding air and held it. If she cried any longer, she would ruin her makeup. Although, where else would she go that night? Who would see her? What had she done? With no one to hear her or see her, Deborah repeated to herself, "I failed as a mother. I'm a bad mom." The reasons why she was a bad mom did not hold long in her head. The statement made no sense to her, but if her children treated her this way, it must be true. It seemed like they all hated her. Shelly. She had yet to think about her flicker of hope, Shelly. The winds of distance were blowing on this relationship's flame, but Shelly had not cut off her mother's phone calls. She had hardly visited since her marriage, one male whom Deborah suspected was the cause, but Deborah thought she could get her visit number up. After flying out multiple times to see her daughter, she decided she had earned a few visits. She needed to find the right timing to bring it up. When it came to it, she did not intend to get replaced by another family. Wiping her face off, Deborah took more time to toy with the idea of calling Shelly, but she decided not to risk feeling more disappointment. Besides that, she told herself that she did not want her daughter to know of her sorrow. Instead, she called her friend Aria. Deborah had met her best friend at her first church meeting in New York, solving her concerns of constant socialization with strangers. Aria was 10 years younger than Deborah, in her late 30s, but she shared similar woes. Workplace drama, family drama, the expense of eating out, but doing it anyway. There were differences. Aria worked from home, lived with a loving husband and young daughter, and ate spicier food, but she understood Deborah, and when she didn't understand, she pretended to. By the second ring, Aria answered the phone. "Hey, what's up, Deb?" Deborah sniffled in response. "Are you okay? Can you come over? I need a friend's watching friend." I'm really trying with the voices, guys. So sorry. Aria hummed as she contemplated. Deborah pinched the bed cover underneath her. "What?" "Nothing. I'm just thinking. I'll come over, but give me a half hour or so. Bill and I need to put Lila to bed, and I'll have to get ready." "Get ready? Pfft. Just come over in your pajamas." Deborah let out a stuffy laugh while wiping residue tears. "That's what I'm in." "Huh." Aria snorted. "I'll think about it." The phone call with Aria ended, and Deborah went downstairs to return to her couch. She crawled over the center and landed in the back. As Deborah watched the end of another episode, she peered around a wall corner and glared at the oven's digital lights. 58 minutes following their phone conversation, Deborah's doorbell rang. Because Deborah had shared her digital key on the smart lock app with Aria, she yelled, "Come in." Aria walked in. A thick bun gathered most of her dark hair, excluding two thick strands loose by the sides of her face. Her black joggers seemed more professional than casual, and her thin white sweater supported the point of professionality. Her clothes contrasted cleanly with her almond skin, making her appearance once again sleek and stunning. At age 38, she still held the figure of a pristine ballerina, with a little womanly weight added onto her hips. Babies change bodies, but even as a mother, Aria's physical appearance didn't lead on to any negative changes. Anytime she stood up, she looked like a practicing dancer. Perhaps the glint in her eyes helped with this. Regardless, few could miss Aria's beauty. "So I guess I'm the only one in pajamas," Deborah said, faking a light, laid-back voice. "What? I'm wearing joggers." Joggers aren't pajamas. Oh my gosh, I'm seriously trying with the voices, I promise, guys. Arya stood at the base of the couch. Okay, where's the ice cream? I don't feel like having that anymore. Deborah avoided confessing that she ate large portions of the gallon earlier. But you should. It tastes really good. Deborah stiffened after she said this. She had outed herself. No thanks. Arya motioned for Deborah to move to the side and slipped in beside her. Which episode is this? For the past while, she had stopped paying attention. Analyzing the scene playing, Deborah tuned in for the first time since Arya had arrived. Chandler sat at a restaurant table with Joey on an unpleasant date with a loud, obnoxious woman he knew too well. The one with the candy hearts. Still impressive that you know all the episode names. Not moving her eyes from the television, Deborah said, Savannah made me learn them for a high school class project. Arya appeared to accept the one-sentence answer, but Deborah continued. It was for some sociology class, and it was the only way she spent time with me during her spring break visit. When she was in her best mood, she liked to act out the Joey parts. Arya let out a loud laugh with a small snort at the end. Huh, I wish I had met her. Savannah sounds determined. She's pushy. The recent phone call with Savannah came to mind, and suddenly the fabric of the couch seemed to offer more than her show. Is it still the same with her? Arya asked. Still the same. I tried calling her tonight, and she actually answered, but then she hung up, instantly. It's hard enough that Brandon's going through with the monk thing, but Savannah? She thinks I'm an awful mom. I don't know what I did wrong to deserve this. I'm losing all my children. Frowning, Arya rubbed Deborah's leg. I'm sorry. You can still write letters to Brandon, right? They allow it, but it's not the same. It took great mental vigor for Deborah not to cry. She refused to let any more tears loose. She had already done enough of that earlier. Her makeup could not take much more. With a tight throat, her voice broke at hazardous points. What did I do? Why does Savannah hate me? I tried to give her everything, and now she wants nothing to do with me. 6 years like this, and nothing has changed from when she was 19 and stormed out in a rage. She doesn't visit. She hardly talks to me outside of holidays. What am I supposed to do? I miss her. I just want her to talk to me. Scanning the couch, Arya said, Do you think we could turn this down? The television muted. Here's what I think. There's nothing you can do, aside from what you've already done. You'll have to wait for her. She'll come around. I'm not sure that's true, Deborah said, keeping in mind that Arya only had a 6-year-old. Of course her daughter loved her. Look, I know my kid isn't old and rebellious yet, but I get it. I was Savannah's age once, and I hated my parents. But I came around, and she will too. It will be okay. Let's hope so. Maybe you should call Shelly. She seems like she would talk. I thought about that. She did try talking to me the other day. I'll think about it. Arya patted Deborah's shoulder, and the two spent the rest of their time talking about the actors in the show, their lives then and their lives now, mourning who was gone and praising who was still around. Before the clock hit double digits, Arya left. When her friend disappeared behind the front door, Deborah turned the television volume down and put the captions on. She called Shelly. On the final ring, she heard her daughter's voice. Hey, Mom, how's it going? Good. How are you? Good. How's John? Not so good. He ate too much food earlier and barfed it all up. Currently, he's laying on the couch, basically unmovable. You said he threw up from overeating? Yeah. Shelly's voice dropped. Are you sure? That seems unlikely. Maybe it was something else. I don't know. It might be a stomach bug, but he did eat 2 sandwiches for lunch, and we ate at a burger place for dinner. I mean, I would probably puke, but I have seen John eat so much before. For the first time that day, Deborah laughed without any tears or snot getting in the way. You would not puke. You could eat that with no problem. Don't you remember that time in middle school when you won the hot dog eating contest and you beat all the high school boys? Shelly raced through her words. I remember, Mom. You're right, though. It's probably a stomach bug. Or maybe the burgers. Those things can be so bad for you with all the grease and fat. Clinking sounded in the background. What was her daughter up to? Fast food is so gross, Deborah said, avoiding the silence. It must have been that. No, Mom, I don't think it was that. Lucas ate the same food as John, and he was fine. Also, how long does it take for food poisoning to hit? A few hours, Gumdrop. The clinging stopped for a moment. You know, Mom, I'm not really fond of... Shelly sighed. Never mind. Deborah continued. Are you sure it wasn't the fast food? They could have served the boys' food from different containers or gotten out a new bag of food or... No, John threw up right after he finished eating. Well, maybe it was the stomach bug then. The clinging in the background stopped again. An agitated sound erupted from Shelly's throat. No, Mom, I think I found the cause. I should go. Wait, we just started talking. I know, Mom. I'm sorry. I'll call you on Sunday, okay? I've got to take care of John. Okay, fine. I love you. Love you. Bye. Why didn't her kids ever want to talk to her? End of chapter. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked this video or this chapter, then like the video. You can subscribe if you want to be notified of the upcoming ones. Hit that alert button as well. And thank you for following along and bearing with me as I try to figure out these voices. I'm not a professional, but I like reading to you guys. So thanks again. Bye.